Excited about the state board meeting tomorrow, where we'll have the opportunity to see the draft of Mississippi State Plan presented to the State Board of Education. So the process is the same for all states. So this will help you kind of have a sense of what the process will look like in your state if it hasn't happened already. I know some of you are coming from states where your state plan has maybe already been submitted to the U.S. Department of Education, but some of you are more on Mississippi's timeline. So you might your state board meeting might be coming up soon, where the state is the Department of Education is presenting the plan to the state board. So basically, the Department of Education presents the plan to the state board, and then the state board members say whether or not they think the plan is ready to be posted for public comment. They could say more revisions need to be made before it's ready to be posted for public comment, or they could just say, sign off on it, say this looks good, let's go ahead and post it. And I think it kind of depends on the relationship, within individual states. What's the relationship between the state board and the Department of Education? Sometimes the state boards, I know in New York, there's like a bit of friction between the state board and the Department of Education, but in other places it could just be, whatever the Department of Education wants to do, the state board lets them do that. So I'm not sure what the relationship is like in Mississippi, and maybe we can, if local Mississippi folks have a sense of that, you can share that with us a little bit later on. But so that's what we'll see tomorrow, and then we will have a press conference at 12:30. And at the press conference, we want to do two things. One, we really want to highlight the importance of parents and community members to be engaged in the state planning process. So it's kind of getting down to the wire in Mississippi. This is going to be, we're coming up on people's last opportunity to really have a say in what gets into the final state plan. So we want to highlight the importance of that and let everybody know that they have the right to weigh in on what goes into the state's plan, and talk about how important that is. And then we also want to talk about our specific recommendations, and talk about the importance of the State Department of Education ensuring that they're including strategies to promote positive school climates in their state plans. And we'll talk about that and the work that we've been doing as Dignity in Schools campaign members across the country. So,
I'm going to ask a question. There's other people in the room. Where are you all on your state plan? And the question that she's asked, what are the relationships? Because we want you to be able to replicate whatever is coming out of here to figure out what things are helpful and useful, to you going back.
It's submitted already.
The plan has been submitted. And have you, do you know what's in the plan in terms?
Really read it.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, and I think as a part of this, even with this document here, the summary, executive summary, I don't know if they did one, but this is helpful. And then being able to look at the plan holistically, because there's a lot of pages to the document itself. But I think the conversation that we're going to have is looking at where those priority areas that you need to be looking at. Teacher equity and school improvement. Those are probably two of the main areas that we need to know, because that will impact, the students, So I just wanted to figure out where do we need to help, because it's not too late, because implementation is going to be the key now. And so it's like, if we didn't get in on the passing of the plan, then how do we get in on the implementation end of it? Okay.
right, and that will lead us into the session on Saturday, which unfortunately I'm not going to be here for, but Courtney, who you met over dinner, she'll be staying for that, and so that's going to get into the local implementation of the plan. So after the state submits their plan, then school districts are going to have to develop their plans for how they're going to implement ESSA at the local level. And schools will also be doing a similar process as well. And so on Saturday, we'll be talking about how districts are also required to ensure that parents and community members are meaningfully engaged in that process. But so for today, we'll stick with a focus on the state. So, yep.
I'm sorry, so The districts have the same deadline as the state level as well too.
They don't have the same deadline, but states are required to meaningfully engage parents and community stakeholders in the development of the state plan. So similarly, once states develop their plan for what like state law will be as it pertains to education, school districts will also develop a local plan for how they're going to implement what is set out by the state. And so districts are also supposed to engage, they're required by ESSA to engage parents and community members in the process of, for example, when a school is identified as being a low-performing school, so they're not meeting benchmarks that are set out by the state, school districts have to work with the school to develop a comprehensive improvement plan, and parents and community members are supposed to be part of that process. So there has to be a needs assessment to figure out what the needs of the schools are, why the school is low performing, and so parents, educators, community members are supposed to be a part of that process.
So for the communities that doesn't have the parent involvement or not, is it smart to now like create some things to get that involvement in for ESSA?
That's what I would say, you know, in terms of right now, people are at different levels, okay? So now, if you wasn't a part of the state plan rollout, you definitely have a real opportunity in terms of the local implementation, okay? And understanding what the law says around school improvement, or what the law says around teacher effectiveness, what the law is requiring to be done, you may have a closer look on the local level than you did on the state level, you know? And for me, that is going to be important, you know, because that's going to impact what's going in the classroom.
Right, and then just to add to that, DeQuan, just so you get a better sense of what some of Mississippi is doing, and in particularly with Nolly Jenkins Family Center, and actually the federal liaisons period in Mississippi. When you do the organizer work, you really find out that a lot of your local school districts, that upper leadership, some of them don't quite understand what ESSA is. What I've been finding out when I'm talking to community members and people just in general, I have to refer to it as the new No Child Left Behind. And so we're also devising plans in order to not only just bring community into this process, but legislators and our local district. Because as Leah said, that they have to do a plan as well. And so we utilize in our district, again, and I always push this, our P16 Community Engagement Councils, because that's a space that's independent of the district, but they have been trained around ESSA, so therefore when they go to the different neighborhoods within the county, they're able to leave these one-pagers and talk about ESSA. And then what we're trying to do is have a district forum where we bring in a whole lot of people. We got some spaces where we actually could do a large forum to actually sit down and actually go over this. I have a meeting when this is all over with our superintendent, because she was invited. All superintendents in the state of Mississippi was invited to tomorrow's process. I know ours will not be there, but she needs to be in the space. But there's something else and she won't be in the space. So basically for me, she's relying on what community organizers are doing to give her some feedback. So, but I say that to say this, I'm okay with that to a certain degree, but if I'm working, because we're supposed to all work collectively together and be in partnership with our school districts, when you need me, you'll call on us, but Nolly's had a lot of programs and other things that can help schools improve, help with school climate, and we're always pushed back. But she's in need of our organization now because she's not where she needs to be as a superintendent in our district around ESSA. So when she extended the invite, it was really funny. She extended the invite. Miss Janice, I got this great news. MDE is going to be presenting their draft state plan, and we need to, mobilize a lot of people and go to the State Board of Education's meeting. And I just politely responded, already there. That's how I responded to her, already there. And then she responded back, how many people are you taking? But I don't give her a lot of, the organization's information, because sometimes you have to be careful what you put out as well. But I know that they're gonna be looking for some things, so keep that in mind too. But I don't know if your state actually have them, but Mississippi, we have P16 Council. And I currently am the chair of our P16 Council, and we've been doing ESSA since February, training community around what it is, bringing in teachers. We can't get the superintendent in that space, but we've brought in teachers. We've brought in some of the principals in that space as well to talk about what ESSA really is. But again, I have to refer to it as the new No Child Left Behind. So that gives you that sense of where people really are.
So I have a question about the ability to hold the districts accountable to ESSA. So I know charter schools are a part of this because it's federal, right? That, you know, sometimes that just can mean nothing, but like, so what can accountability looks like if school districts, because you know, we have all of our charters are their own school districts at this moment. We're doing some reunification, but they're still not accountable to our local school boards, right? So I'm just trying to see what accountability looks like and what the mechanisms are if a district isn't properly utilizing ESSA.
Well, with the laws, and I thought, Liz can really address her legal work around that. There are certain things around ESSA in the law they can't get around. They can't, it's law. And even though the regs, they shouldn't, okay, I agree. They shouldn't be able to get around. And I know throughout this process, some of the regulations change, and we know sometimes laws are guided by the regulations, but the law is still going to be the top priority as to what state and local districts has to do. They can hem and hum and talk about it all they want, but they really got to address it.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's not necessary because I, you know, do IDEA laws appropriately. Like the kids are not getting a bunch of things that they need to get that should fall under a bunch of federal laws. So I'm just trying to see what the accountability piece.
Well, each state has their own accountability model. And we have ours is a 3-tier model that speaks to before a child fails, interventions have to happen on a bigger scale. But I think also when they start talking about the bottom 5%, or those districts that are F districts, I think that begins to open up some of the accountability conversation. But I think you have to know what that accountability model is, in your state, so that you can figure out. With No Child Left Behind, that was one of the first things that we were able to come in on. Mississippi was number 6 to turn their model in the whole nation, and they're still using that same model. And it has really given parents and students an uplift because they require data being reported. Parents know. They also are saying interventions have to be in place, and you have to know what they are. It ain't about moving the child from the back of the room to the front of the room. It is real stuff. So when you talk about accountability, and I guess the question for me to you is, because I know you're speaking of something very specific, Gina. What are you?
I mean, we just lack accountability across the board. Like I don't want to suck up the time. I was just kind of curious, and I think what you're saying in regards to the accountability model. But because we can't really get in specific school to do stuff because they don't want to work with us, right? So it's not like, because we had an MOU with a charter network, and then the CEO left and they got a new CEO, and she's looking at us like, yeah, no.
So I think it's important though to explain for new folks in the room. Gina's in New Orleans, so you're looking at this charter,
Right, this whole other, so we're 99% of a charter, 99. We're still kind of holding on to a couple of schools, and so we have like 45, 46, 48 school districts. It depends on if they keep the schools, and everything just is fluid, right? It's just fluid. Like you, in the hone in, like you might work with a CEO of a network, and she's here today and gone, right? The teachers are gone, like everything moves like crazy. So it makes it really complicated to figure the accountability part out. And shit, don't nobody know stuff. Our superintendent, he knows he's not following the law. He never did. He didn't do the child level crime. They're not doing IDEA. They're not doing PBIS. They're not doing any of them. And those are all laws,
Yeah.
right? Like if they follow the laws in Louisiana, we'd be good. But that doesn't really happen. So, but I have to look on the P16 what the councils are and what the accountability models are. And we get shut out of.
Well, your P16 councils, first of all, let me say with the P16 council, the only way, and that's a mandate here in Mississippi, from 2014, 2013, 2014, maybe some, around in there, where schools that were underperforming and less than successful, it was a mandate that they had to have a P16 council inside of their school district. And we played a part of that critically, and they changed the standard because even in that process, and Nina, I think she was in some of those spaces. We actually had to go and speak to, because they were trying to get rid of it. But it works in our district. At least it works in Holmes County. I can speak for Holmes. It works in Holmes County. And an example of how it works, Mississippi also has what we call a third grade gate, a literacy-based promotion act. LPBA, whatever it is. Okay, but it's the literacy-based promotion act, where if third graders, once they take the exit exam, if they don't pass it, and they give a couple of retests, they still don't pass it, they're retaining our third graders. So the first year that this, and we've just shortened it and said third grade gate. And so that first year that exam was administered, over 80% of our students did not pass it. So we had a lot of students that ended up being retained, even after the first exam, the 2 retests. So we were like, okay, we need to step in and do something about this. The P16 council, and we fought to keep it. They changed the standard, but we fought to keep it. We made a change. The district doesn't acknowledge what the P16 council work is and what we've done to move some of this process, but it was because of our work that this year, I can report it, even last year, that those third graders that was retained, the first time they took the test, all of them passed it. This year, when our third graders took it, a little over 270 some third graders, 85% of them passed it. The ones that did not pass it, they passed it on the first retest. But again, that was the work, but that was something they were trying to get rid of. It is a council that's independent of school districts. School district leadership can be on that council, but it is a community-driven council process. And if it's worked the way it's supposed to be worked, inside of the guidelines and the mandates from the states, it works. And graduation rate, even our graduation rate was not looking good. Because of the work of our P16 council, we had more graduates. And then we were faced with a challenge just this May. Well, not just May because they graduated May, but come March, we had 180 seniors graduating. They went to take the ACT test. And it's a shame for what I'm going to just tell you all, because we made progress there, and I'm just so grateful for it. Only 15 of that 180 passed it the first time around. So now we're up in an uproar. What are we going to do? We're going to have all of these. Pardon me?
What defines passing?
For ACT.
For ACT, for our district, 16 to 18.
Okay. All right.
And that's law.
Okay.
And so we thought, okay, what can we do as an incentive to encourage students? So we got with the superintendent, and she worked with us. Any student that could actually pass it with 22 or better, she was given a money, like a money scholarship, a scholarship. We work with those students. Saturdays, after school programs, we use all of our resources inside of our communities, which we've been saying all along, you need to do that, instead of bringing in outside consultants. When they actually took our word for using inside resources, I told you how many, 180, only 15. When that retest came, the remainder of those students passed. So everybody walked across their graduation stage, they got a diploma. But who got the credit for that? Our superintendent in the school district. But it wasn't them that did it. They didn't open up their churches, they didn't open up anything. We used ministers, we went to ministers and say, hey, a lot of these kids are members of your church. They go to Sunday school, they go to vacation Bible school, open up these spaces and let's start working with these students. That's what helped get these kids across that stage and get our kids to reading at levels where they should be reading so they wouldn't be retained, right? And so, but that's the only way you can have P16 councils, if you have failing districts inside your district, in your school district.
And that's in the state of Mississippi.
And that is in the
Other
state of
states do
Mississippi.
have
Other
similar-
states may have similar.
It may not be big, yeah, but they do
Right.
have similar programs. But the other thing about that in terms, I think what you just said is, so is there a place in ESSA where the resources can go into community-based organizations to do the kind of work that you say that you all did, as opposed to giving millions of dollars to interventionists and consultants who come in and do nothing. So,
Doesn't necessarily require, funds to be given to community organizations. Less, I know, so title, the 21st century, 21st century grant program. I believe that does require community partnerships, and that's specific to after-school and before-school programs. Other than that, I don't know of any other funding under ESSA that would require community partnership.
Well,
But if,
actually, there is a recommendation that money can be spent on training with parents included in the work, and there's some encouragement that parents and teachers work together to do that those school improvement fees, and there can be some set aside money, but I haven't seen any of that in our plan, in our Mississippi plan.
It's not.
I can't see anything here as
I
we
did
read
not.
this. I think that's the big missing piece.
because that work is a testament to that.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it's not inside of the state plan. And then Gina did mention also about IDEA and, children with disabilities. There's not a lot inside of our state plans that address our students with disabilities.
Go ahead, Cameron.
Yes, okay, so, hi, new to the party, and we have only, Racial Justice Now is the only organization in Ohio that's working as an organization in regards to ESSA. So I guess maybe to keep it quick on my end is seeing who we can lean on, because our capacity is extremely low. We're working with 2 members plus Zakia.
Right.
So, and she's basically the continuity person because she started the work on ESSA. So now in the transition, you have 2 new people who haven't been trained in ESSA, but we've had a training back in February. I think Candace Lucas, I want to say is her name, came in and did some community training, but obviously, I don't believe our capacity and what we need to do in terms of base building to even get those type of results, because right now, I mean, the latest is 84% in Ohio, 84% of our schools are failing. So obviously, that's a very high number. So all of these questions that are coming around the table, all of this dialogue, obviously, there's an impact that Ohio, it has impact in our area in Ohio. So from accountability to who are the playmakers, who gets the resources to ensure that there's a success rate, that we can see measurements, so we can see indicators. I know Ohio's giving us some, and this is what I've known is, across our table, is that Ohio's giving pushback even in terms of school climate indicators. So when we're literally, even though we're a team of 3, 2.5, 3, it's really only 1 in the eyes of, all of the different, from the school district to the leaders to everything, even on a local level, to even start talking about state level. But I know that we've gotten some things and some collaborations pushed through in terms of the suspension bans and things of that nature. But if we're looking at this ESSA thing and we're looking at how this rolls out and meaningful engagement, I think, again, who can we lean on within this within this space to ensure that we're lifting up the work. Otherwise, we may be able to get in on a couple things like we did with HB 410, but I'm not quite sure we again have the capacity to really go hard about this ESSA and make sure that our districts are following it, make sure that there is engagement, and then build our base, getting our parents involved, getting community resources, like you said, the churches involved, so we again can start looking at that measuring stick. Because 84% failing, that's awful, obviously.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. I think it really does require like a broad base of people to like push the state to do the right thing. And if you don't have that, if you're just like one organization with like a couple of staff, that can be really challenging. Which I think is why the public education and like media outreach piece is so important. Which is why we're doing the press conference tomorrow, to educate more parents about what's going on and how they can get involved. So that's a start. I think the Mississippi folks have had a lot of success in mobilizing parents and community members. Obviously, there's more of them. There's more organizations. There's a whole like local coalition here. So obviously, it's different than your capacity in Ohio. But maybe we can hear from you all later about how you've been able to reach out to parents and community members and get them involved and engaged in this work. And I'm sure there's some lessons learned there, even if you can't do it to the same extent because you just don't have the people.
But I think even if a little bit here and a little bit there, to me, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to start somewhere.
I think in this summary, I'm looking at, I don't know what page it is right now, but we're talking about current initiatives and recommendations to attain goals of Mississippi Succeed Act. This breaks it off into measurable pieces. I mean, you may not be able to do everything, but they have several things here. And I think for us, even with No Child Left Behind, we didn't try to cover the whole law because we didn't have capacity either. But when you look at this law, think about where you have capacity or interest to do something. All students proficient and showing growth in all access areas. That could be something that you launch a campaign. But you know that you need to see what the data is first. But you may just do that one thing because that opens up doors to conversation, that opens up doors to accountability because what is the state doing? Now, I'm not sure if these would be the same for Louisiana or Ohio, but at the end of the day, I think it can be replicated because, at the end of the day, all of this stuff is so generic and specific. If children are going to do well, this is what it looks like. And if y'all don't have one, then what about starting a campaign to even start something like this, using this as something to replicate? And that was one of the reasons we wanted to do something together like this because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, And if your community is one of those that's totally resistant, then how do you go in with a document like this that shows the numbers and shows the data, but also shows ideas about how you can improve? And it may not be all of these. It may be one or two that gets you in the door of the conversation. School improvement monies, that's going to be major. Those failing schools, the federal is supposed to be putting money out and the state is supposed to be putting money out. But then how is it going to be dispersed?
Right.
Where is it going to go?
Ohio already has in place laws that parents and community members are supposed to be on the local school improvement teams. That's already there in the law. And they're supposed to be teams at the district level. So that's your entrance into that. They're called, school improvement teams.
Yeah,
And then they're called district improvement teams. It's in the law, it's in your Ohio law about how that's supposed to be implemented. And parents are supposed to be part of that. If you give me your contact information, I'll send you a PowerPoint of that that I created to explain that.
I appreciate that because I think that this goes to Gina's point, it's the accountability piece. If people aren't asking for it, then and we've already been deemed, even as far as our funding is concerned, it's unconstitutional by Ohio
Yeah.
state laws.
So
So
the-
it's like a whole bunch of we don't care.
I cannot remember what the in count is in Ohio. It might be 30, which I think is really disgusting,
I think
because, is it 30, is it 15
It
now?
used to be 30, I think.
Okay, so
They
it's
lowered it
changed.
to 15.
Yeah, but, and I can't remember, I would think it's difficult with the charter school group because you're not gonna be able to see that probably, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you'll be able to see the disaggregated data because they're going to say they can't show it because it's less than their in count. One time New Orleans had 30, do we know what it is now? So there's some ways, especially because it's not district, used to you couldn't hide it if you had a district. Because you would combine the district and you could still see the disaggregated data and you'd be able to do it. So I would think that that's probably something you're gonna have to ask, how are they breaking that data down?
And we have groups that, I mean, those, and parents are on all of those groups, but the parents that they get are just,
Yeah, they
Status
got
quo.
parents.
yes, thank you.
But I think for the organizing of it, then you all have to step back and recognize that it's not gonna happen from the inside.
No, I get that, but I love to hear, and it doesn't have to be now, because this will take up all the time. But like the parents that we work with, we're dealing with the actuality of the suspension stuff, and just, so I'm trying to think of like, how do you talk about ESSA in a way that is applicable to the struggle that's happening right now, right? And we use up all of our time, like it takes us months to to go through due process, right? And especially if you're trying to get stuff off children's permanent record, the amount of advocacy like we're having to do, we just have 2 full-time staff and a bunch of family members. But when you're talking about the crazy reason our kids get suspended for it, and so they just do all kind of stupid shit. They won't let kids graduate, walk across the stage. They'll retract their work. We got this whole, oh my God, Rasan did not get to walk across the stage.
No.
You just, and we didn't even know. He said he was in suspension working with a tutor on Spanish, and the tutor was a wrong tutor, and he cheated on the test, so they held the kids accountable. So literally, look at our Facebook page, you will see that they did not allow, the whole kids' graduations were ruined because they didn't let a couple of kids walk, because the morning of the graduation, they locked and so this is a standalone state school, right? And the accountability is crazy, so that's what you get. So when you're dealing with parents and you try to talk about ESSA, and even No Child Left Behind, to bring that down to the local daily, that's what I'd love to at some point, just kind of hear, because our parents are not even hearing that, because we're dealing with the reasons, the kids are getting suspended from and expelled off the bus for eating crack. It's crazy shit. Y'all just, just crazy stuff. So.
That's a great segue into the next part of our conversation. So we've talked about how, to develop a campaign, you really can't focus on the whole of ESSA. It's too much.
It's too much.
You really need to focus on specific aspects of it. So for DSC, since our coalition is about ending school pushout, we have focused on the provisions in ESSA that focus on school climate, which there are a few. So we, I should have brought copies of the ESSA DSC 2-pager on ESSA state plans and school climate provisions, but I think probably most of you have seen at some point, but it's just a good refresher of our priorities for DSC's priorities for ESSA state plans. It's also what we use to develop this checklist, which we're going to go through now, and then we're going to look at Mississippi's draft state plan and see how well it's aligned with the checklist. And so, in order, in terms of how ESSA, which is this big federal law, impacts what goes on the ground in terms of kids getting suspended for crazy things, there is a role for ESSA to play in that, and we've been saying that states need to include school climate as an accountability indicator and measure that by looking at school discipline data which would discourage schools from suspending kids for stupid things that should be just handled in the classroom, or, you know, there's like alternative methods, you know, restorative justice that we've talked about, school-wide positive behavioral interventions and supports, school-based mental health services, professional development for teachers, so they're not handling, you know, like minor disruptions with like suspensions, things like that. And so that's what we've been at, that's been like one of our key priorities, right? Is like asking states to measure school quality by looking at school climate, and specifically looking at how many kids are getting suspended and who's getting suspended. Are there, you know, black students that are getting disproportionately suspended in schools compared to the white students? And so that's been like one of our key, you know, coalition priorities, which is reflected here on this checklist. And I'm just going to go through, I think most of you have probably seen a version of this. This is a slightly revised version from the original version. So if you remember, so the Obama administration, they had developed a template for basically like the format that states were supposed to use when they submitted their plans to the U.S. Department of Education. Then when Trump became president and Secretary DeVos became secretary, they revised that template and developed a new one. They said that, you know, the new template was only going to focus on what was absolutely necessary under the law. The old template had both what was required under the law, what was required under the regulations for accountability and state plans, which were overturned by Congress. And that other template also highlighted some best practices. So, you know, things that states didn't necessarily have to do, but things that they were encouraged to do. So this new template, it doesn't have any reference to the regulations because they're no longer in effect. It really focuses on kind of like the bare minimum under the law, which is still, you know, for our purposes, you know, there are still provisions related to school climate that states are required to follow, which is a good thing. So we'll talk about those things. So this new revised checklist is aligned with the new template, which I think in the next cycle, most states are going to use that since that's out there. The states that have already submitted their plans, they didn't really use it as much because they were like, we're already doing what we're doing, leave us alone. But I think there would, like, the Department of Education, I think, was not happy with that, so I think states going forward, they're going to use the new template, so that's why and Mississippi did, so that's why we're looking at this revised checklist. So this should be in the order, everything on the checklist should be in the same order as the information that's in the plan, so it's hopefully easy to find what you're looking for. There's actually one thing that I realized that we need to add to this, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I think we can just kind of like go through and talk about what's actually in this Mississippi draft state plan. And Courtney is also making copies of the letter that we're sending to the State Department of Education and the State Board tomorrow morning in advance of the board meeting, so we'll have a chance to look at that.
Let me just ask, what was that meeting you said that you didn't see in the plan? And Janice, you were saying like the idea.
The real information about how parents and communities are supposed to be involved.
But it's something about money too, though.
Oh yeah, there was a set aside of up to, schools could spend up to 2% of their total Title I funds on parent engagement training, and there's also something in there that they could hire and work with community groups, nonprofit community groups, to help with engagement and student work. It's in ESSA, but I don't see it in here anywhere. That's what I'm saying. I'll pull that out. I've got some notes on it.
But it sounds like that's not necessarily a requirement, that's like,
They can,
they can't, so it wouldn't necessarily have to be in Mississippi's plan,
Well,
right?
in ESSA, it says you can do this.
Right.
This is how,
Right.
But that's it, the key.
Right,
You
but it's not
can't,
required.
if it's not required, that doesn't mean that they will do
would
it.
say you'd have it in here
Yeah.
somewhere.
Right.
Or at least to school districts, a recommendation to school districts, don't forget you can spend this money in these ways.
Right.
right?
Right.
You go ahead.
Sure. All right, so we'll just go ahead and go through. So the first section is Title I, Part A. So improving basic programs operated by a local education agency. So I would start with, like, if you were looking through your own state plan, I would go to the table of contents to see where Title I Part A starts. So on Mississippi's plan, it starts on page 6. So you can go ahead and flip to page 6 where the information on Title I Part A starts. So then one of our coalition priorities for state plans, one of DSC's priorities for state plans was around subgroups. So ESSA requires states to capture and report the performance of all students and student subgroups. And so that means that all states, for all the different accountability indicators that states are going to be looking at, like test scores, graduation rates, school quality, student success, they need to look at how the school is doing as a whole, and then they have to look at how subgroups are doing too. So if there are ethnic and racial minorities in the school, or if there are economically disadvantaged students, English language learners, students with disabilities, those are all subgroups that they are required to report on in addition to the school as a whole, to make sure that, you know, those subgroups are also getting a quality education. Our coalition ask, or, you know, something that we've been urging states to do, is to go above and beyond the minimum requirements of the law. So states have a lot of flexibility in determining what the N size is, and what that basically means. I don't think I do a great job of explaining this in a way that's like super easy to understand, so if you have questions, please let me know. But it basically means, for example, like let's take Black students. So like a Black student subgroup within a school. In order for that group of students, in order for their outcomes to be measured separately, so, you know, you're always going to look at all students in the school, so the students as a whole, but if you also want to look at individually, how are the Black students doing in the school? Sorry. They're on the back table. You would have to, if the state set an in size of, let's say, 10, there would only have to be 10 students in the school for the school to be required to look at the Black students' performance. If the state sets an in size of 30, then if there's 29 Black students in the school, you wouldn't have to report on how the Black students are doing.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think that would actually influence, yes, it influences what schools accept kids? So kind of this whole
Well, that's a good point.
discrimination thing. Like if my family lives in a more, let's just say the school choice thing. I think that's the easier way to put it. So I know that I have our number is 30. We have 29 on the roll, so then I can deny you access to this particular school because it benefits me. Because now I don't have to report on Black students, even though that's a requirement. I've created a situation, I've manipulated it to where it doesn't have to happen like that.
By not allowing Black students to enroll.
By like kind of almost having this cap, you know, like, okay, if we know that we have to do this reporting, if there's 30, then we're going to cut it off at 29.
Well, but remember, the district is still going to have to show it, because the district will have to aggregate all of those Black students at every one of those schools.
Okay.
And so you might get 30, and the district is going to get dinged. And the district, those kids got to go somewhere in that school system. I would think there's some,
Okay.
you know,
Well,
part.
so it wouldn't be a disincentive for the district. The district wouldn't necessarily care which schools the kids go to, but at the school level,
Yeah.
it could be.
It could-
But, I mean, I guess, yeah, I don't know to what extent that is happening. I know with like, so I used to work with an organization that worked with recent immigrant English language learners. And so it was like high school students, immigrant high school students who are coming to the country for the first time, didn't speak any English. So they might be like 15 years old, not speak any English, you know, coming to school in ninth grade, with maybe even very limited education in their home country. And so there were a lot of schools that turned those kids away, or, just,
okay.
yeah.
That's,
And
yeah.
yes, so, and then, advocates would have to get involved and make the district aware of that issue. That's illegal, you can't, it's a public school, it's supposed to serve everyone. And so, yes, that you just need to flag that is happening and.
Amongst a lot of the things that advocates have to do.
Right.
Exactly. Okay.
No one said our jobs were easy.
So are any states putting one of the disaggregated groups, LB?
Not that I know of, so this
No.
is like something that we're encouraging states to do so far. I don't know of any state that is doing this. So this is not a requirement, but we're asking states to include students who self-identify as LGBTQ as a subgroup, because we know that those students also are disproportionately bullied, harassed, disciplined in school, which obviously would impact their academic achievement. And so we've been encouraging states to, it's not a requirement, so it's, something that we're encouraging them to do is include this additional subgroup, which they can include. There's like certain subgroups that they're required, which those are the ones that I listed, but they can include other subgroups as well. But so far we have not been successful in doing that. But so let's see what Mississippi has for its subgroups. So first we're just looking to see, well, I can just tell you that they have not included LGBTQ as a subgroup, but I'll show you where it should be. So Title I Part A, so you're scanning for the headings and you're just looking for the heading that says subgroup. So that's on page 9 at the top of the page. You can see subgroups. So it lists all the different subgroups. So we have the economically disadvantaged students, students with disabilities, English language learners, and then the ethnic and racial minorities. So we see that they're not using LGBTQ students. So that's something in our letter, which Courtney's printing out for us. You'll see we're still urging them to do that. So minimum in size for accountability, which we just talked about in size. So you're going to continue to scan and you're going to look for the heading that says minimum in size for accountability, which is on the next page. And so we're asking states to set an in size of 10 because there's two things to consider with in size. One, we want to make sure that as many subgroups are captured in the accountability system as possible. But we also don't want like so small of a number. Like let's say if you have an in size of 1. So it's like if you have one black student in an all-white school, then you're gonna like separately count that student's performance, but you're gonna know that that student is like John or whatever. So you're gonna know like all about John, so that's not a good thing. But research shows that an in size of 10 is enough to protect students' privacy. But it's low enough to make sure that students enough subgroups are being captured in the accountability system. So under minimum in size, so Mississippi is one of the states, you see it says the minimum number of students used in the accountability system, measures is 10. So that's a great thing. I know that that's the in size that they had previously, so that's not necessarily a result of our work. But we did ask them back in our letter that we sent to them in October, we praised them for that in size. We asked them to maintain it. They did maintain it, so that's a good thing. So next we have the school quality or student success indicator. So this is where we have our key DSC priority for state plans that's where you're going to find it. So ESSA requires states to use a minimum of 4 indicators, including a measure of school quality or student success in their accountability systems. One way that states can demonstrate school quality is by measuring school climate and safety. So we're going to look for the heading that says school quality or student success indicators. So it's going to go past the required indicators and keep going until you see that school quality or student success. So we're going to pass the academic ones, the graduation rates, the test scores, and then once you get to page 23, you see the school quality or student success indicators. So they can use more than one, and Mississippi is using 3. So they're using the academic growth of the lowest performing students as an additional student success indicator. And that's a measure that's consistent across all grade levels. So they're looking at that for all schools. And then there's two other indicators that they're looking at just for high school. So one, and this is on the next page, on page 24, the college and career readiness indicator. So that's looking at performance on ACT scores. And then there's another one that's just for high school, and that is the acceleration indicator. And that is looking at, that's like on page 24 also, it's like toward the end of that last paragraph. So the acceleration indicator, so that's looking at the percentage of students that are taking and passing assessments related to accelerated courses. So that's like your AP courses, your IB courses, and things like that. So they're not looking at school climate as an accountability indicator, and in our letter, we're acknowledging these things as, you know, things that are important in terms of education equity. It's great that they're looking at student access to advanced courses, seeing how students are doing on the ACT scores, which can, you know, be an indicator of whether or not they're going to be able to go to college. So seeing how their high schools are preparing them for, you know, success after high school. But we are still urging them to consider including school climate as an accountability indicator. And we are asking all states to measure that by looking at discipline data and school climate surveys. And we do have some examples of states that are already doing that.
There are states that did pick that, because the argument here with them, when I asked about it as well, and you can't really measure that. That's their.
Well, but you
so
can
do
measure
have it,
discipline
yeah.
data, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's just such a concrete thing.
Yeah.
If it was something just like fuzzy, like, oh, measure school climate, then I could see that pushback, but we're giving them very specific. Yeah, we're just telling them to look at, you know, how many students are suspended and who are those students. And those are actually things that they're already required to report to the civil rights data collection. And now under ESSA, it also needs to be reported on state and district report cards. So they already have to report that information. We're just saying that schools should also be held accountable for that information. All right, so school conditions. And yes, so to answer your question, so Georgia already includes school discipline data in their accountability system, and there are, I believe California, right now there's like a consortium of school districts that is doing it, but California statewide, they haven't submitted their plan yet, but in the draft of their plan, they're including suspensions, and there's other states that are including school climate in some way. Not necessarily 100% aligned with our recommendations, but definitely taking steps in the right direction. So school conditions. So this is all states are required under ESSA to explain in their state plans how they're going to support school districts in improving school environments for learning. And specifically, one of the things that they have to do is describe how they're going to support districts in reducing the overuse of practices that push students out of the classroom. So we can see how Mississippi is going to do that. Looking at the heading for
39.
Thank you. School conditions. It's very short for Mississippi, right? So I would not say this is like a super robust plan as it's outlined here, but so they say they're going to provide professional development for guidance counselors, administrators, and teachers. Will remain a focus as the department works to implement positive behavioral interventions and supports. So, I mean, it is a good thing that they are going to provide professional development for school staff, and that they're working to implement positive behavior interventions and supports. There's other parts of the state plan that get a little bit more detailed, which is why I realized that we need to add another section here in the checklist for Title IV Part A. So that is a funding source under ESSA. It's a grant program that provides funding for things like school-based mental health services, conflict resolution, professional development for implicit bias for teachers and things like that. So that's another place to look, and so we'll add that to the checklist. We'll look at that section of Mississippi's plan. One of the things that we are urging them to do is to make sure that they're targeting additional supports to the districts that have the worst issues with school discipline. And there's examples of states that are doing that in a meaningful way. So we highlight that in the other state examples in our letter. All right, so Title I, Part D. So, good job, James. So yeah, 46.
I ain't read it thoroughly like I should, but some things I specifically targeted, so page 46 now.
All right, so Title I, Part D. So this is the funding under ESSA for prevention and intervention programs for children and youth who are neglected, delinquent, or at risk. So this is an optional grant program, optional funding source, and not all states have to request this. But we're encouraging all states to request this, and we're encouraging them to use the funds to improve the quality of coursework in juvenile facilities so that when students do transition back, they're not behind. So you can see Mississippi's objectives and outcomes for their Title I Part D program. So they're going to provide technical support for the staff at the state's correctional facilities, focusing on strategies that serve students who are enrolled in the program long term. We'll show at least a 5% increase in reading proficiency between pre-test and post-tests. And students who are enrolled in the program long term will show at least a 5% increase in math proficiency between pre-tests and post-tests. And a couple other outlined outcomes. So we are glad that they're using Title I Part D funds. We think that these outcomes are good outcomes that they're looking at, but we're also encouraging them to make sure that the curriculum in the facilities is the same curriculum as students would get in a regular school. And there are examples of other states that have those goals outlined, so we highlight in the letter that we're sending to Mississippi education officials. So then we get into this supplemental information section. So in this new template, under the Trump administration, there's no section for where states are supposed to provide evidence that they engage stakeholders in a meaningful way. In the template under the Obama administration, they did have to provide that evidence. The new template just says you can provide that evidence if you want to, which is not a good thing. So we're asking states, even though it's not required, to provide that evidence. Mississippi, as far as I can tell, has not. So that's something that we're asking them to do in the letter that we're sending to them. And then this second piece under performance management. So one of the things, we were trying to keep this, make sure that it didn't go over page front and back. There is this other section which we can talk about, which we left for, in addition to the coalition priorities for state plans that we're asking all DSC members to push forward. There's obviously going to be, times where there might be some local needs that go beyond what we're asking for as a coalition. So that's definitely true for Mississippi. Teacher quality and teacher shortages is a huge problem in Mississippi, so that's been another key priority that groups here in Mississippi have been working on, so that's something that they would add to this. And we can get to that in a minute. So I'm thinking, and interesting hearing feedback on this, so this performance management section, this was something that one DSC member recommended. So ESSA requires states and districts to publish annual report cards that include discipline data. And so it was like, did your state describe how it will use the discipline data on annual report cards to assess the effectiveness of state and local strategies and progress toward improving student outcomes? So you might be able to find that somewhere in the state plan, and under the last template, there was a section that like maybe a state could have included that information, but there really isn't a place for that here. And so I would suggest that we take this out and put Title IV Part A funds, really looking at like how states are using Title IV Part A funds. And we can look at that for Mississippi quickly. So that actually comes before, I'm gonna have to go back to the table of contents to see where that is. 73, right? Yeah, so that's the student support and academic enrichment grants. And I'm not gonna read through all of it here, but you can see the different programs that they're gonna use. So it's not just resources specific to school climate. This is a very broad grant program that can be used for well-rounded education, for healthy students. So, you know, they're gonna be using it for like early childhood programming, for college and career pathways, arts integration, but there is one section for safe and healthy students, which is where you're most likely to see things related to school climate. So that's what I would recommend that how we modify the checklist. What are people's thoughts on that?
Under the safe and healthy students portion.
Yeah, so just instead of keeping this like performance management piece, which states, they're not required to say how they're going to use the report card results, so I just don't think it's information that's going to be in the state plan, but we definitely do want to see how states are using Title IV Part A funds. We want to make sure that they're using it to support school climate in the ways that we know are effective, such as the restorative justice program. Professional development for teachers on implicit bias would be great. So I just want to make sure that people know to look there for information on school climate.
Jess, remember when we were trying to get them to track the data for restraint and seclusion?
Yes.
And they wanted to, they said they could do it, but they didn't have anyone at the department who could look at it and keep track of it. Like they would require the schools to do it. Do you think we could have some wording in there that we know the data's being tracked? There needs to be someone looking at it to then put programs in place and recommend the programs?
Yeah, so we are recommending that they are, because like you said, so there are, all states should have access to this data because it's being reported to CRDC. And then there are some states that go kind of beyond that. So like Ohio has actually better data than what's submitted to the feds. And so we're really asking states to, even if they're not, we're asking them to use that in their accountability system, but whether or not they're doing that, we're asking them to also use that data to figure out which schools and districts need to be targeted for these supports.
Is there somewhere that we talk about trauma-informed schools?
Not explicitly. And so, are you saying that that's something that should be on the checklist?
I'm curious. I know that's something that we've been talking a lot about and really have been looking at that pushed in our state, especially looking at the stuff that our families have dealt with in New Orleans after Katrina and all of the other stuff and shit, just the white supremacy, gentrification, like all the kinds of things that are. So, would this be a place, I guess, the safe and healthy students piece would be?
Yeah, I think that.
We're pushing for training and stuff like that for families.
Yeah, because on page 53, I've been looking at pages 52 and 53, which is talking about administrator evaluation system components and then the professional development menu of services. That probably would be a good place, because they have identified in this plan the types of training that they want to offer. This would be a good place to offer some of the other different types of training that will speak to the work of Dignity in Schools campaign. I'm looking at this 360-degree feedback tool. It's a bunch of crap. It's something that they pulled out of the business world. We use it at the college that I work at. We recently went from a institutional evaluation tool that looked at educator effectiveness in the classroom. We looked at what students were saying about educators in terms of their attitude, their demeanor, whether or not they were accessible. Of course, these are adults, but this should be some focus on this 360, because what is supposed to happen with this is, for the principal, they're supposed to be able to get all of this feedback from individuals that they supervise, and then they're supposed to be, it is supposed to be anonymous feedback. You know, I kind of worry about very, very small situations where, like for example, at the agricultural high school that's on the campus where I work, it's practically impossible, because when it's the survey sent out and you know the position name, you know who the person is. The other piece of this is that oftentimes with the 360-degree feedback, you're often asked to evaluate people who you don't come into a lot of contact with. So it's going to be very important to look at the individual items inside of this evaluation tool. And some of that Mike can speak to. Educators, you know, what type of demeanor do you observe? Do you observe how they speak to students, how they interact with students? How, you know, especially since you have all of these folks coming in to observe the classroom. So now maybe in that evaluation form, they can speak to the way they're making those observations.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of this is like all about implementation, right? Like I think a lot of these things could sound good on paper, but we really need to pay close attention to, so it's not just like after the state plan is over, we really need to see like how things are being implemented.
Yeah, because my fear would be is that someone found a nice pretty study online and said, oh wow, this works in the business world. So, you know, let's take what they have, not modify it much, and stick it into an educational system, and that doesn't always work. And so as an educator who we've been using 360 for 2 years, I've never received any meaningful feedback from a 360 survey, because when somebody doesn't know what you do every day, they can't really evaluate you. And so if the system's anonymous, then there's a chance that Rachel may have the opportunity to evaluate my effectiveness as an instructor. She works in the business office. So those are some of the nuances that people have to consider.
Thanks for that. And yes, and Gina, going back to your point too, I think that, you know, if we did include, and I think that we should, but you know, if other people feel differently, would love to hear that. If we include a section so that people know to look for Title IV Part A, I think we can include some recommendations for what we would want those funds to be spent on, and I think trauma, you know, professional development to implement trauma-informed initiatives or programs or schools.
Also in that section, it did mention that, you know, they could set aside 3% of funds for specialized training too. If I'm not mistaken, to look at there. We'll go back. I'll skip on somebody else. So on page 53, on the last paragraph, the ND is planning to use the 3% set aside rule to strengthen leadership development opportunities, is what they were saying.
Yeah, and this gets at, you know, sort of looking at the the local priorities for Mississippi. So educator effectiveness, like I said, is a huge priority for the groups here because the teacher shortage issue is such a big problem. It has been for a long time. So that's something that we included in the letter to the Mississippi Department of Education, looking at, there's a couple different things, sections where this information can come from, but so there's the Title II, Part A, Supporting Effective Instruction, which starts on 48. And, you know, were definitely some practices that we thought were very much aligned with the recommendations that local advocates here have been making. So Janice has been sitting on an ESSA working group that's looking specifically at teacher effectiveness, and she left some recommendations during the last meeting that are by and large reflected in this document. So great for Janice. And hopefully we can hear more about that later on. I'm looking at time, we're like past.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it because I'm ready to go, but I definitely want to get in this because like we got TFA teachers coming out the MA, and like it's just ridiculous that like there should be something that just bans teachers that get 6 weeks of training.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's hard for places that like just wouldn't have anybody in the classroom if they didn't have access to Teach for America teachers. But
You
yeah.
almost have nobody in the classroom. You got our history major trying to teach chemistry.
Right, yeah. But yeah, there definitely needs to be other strategies
Right.
rather than just relying on TFA for sure, which is, so you'll see some of the recommendations that we've made in the letters that I think Courtney passed out to everyone. So this is the letter that we're submitting to the State Department of Education and the State Board in advance of the board meeting tomorrow. That's based on our analysis of the state plan. So definitely take a look at that. It's also has examples from other states that your federal liaison, hopefully you submitted this letter to your State Department of Education that outlines, you know, promising provisions that we've seen in other state plans that submitted in April or March. So I think maybe tomorrow we can get into specifically, the work that you guys have done leading up to this point to get here, and to really get into that and hopefully, continue the conversation. Is that okay? All right, great. So people who are participating in the press conference, if you can hang out for a little bit, so we can just go over talking points. But I think that is all I have for tonight. Joyce, is there anything from Jim?
No, I think this is excellent.
Thank you.
And I think as we move this process, we still are listening at Gina and Cameron and trying to figure out, where the hooks are. There's got to be somewhere, in that plan that the law requires something that you all can catch on to and move. But it's just a matter of you all figuring out what your capacity is around.
There's a bunch of different things, and it's right, it's the capacity,
Right.
which is why I haven't delved into
Right,
it. It's like,
exactly.
And we
it's
did
just too much.
print out for people whose state plans have already been posted, or if there's a draft out there, that we printed that out so you can take a look at that tomorrow too, along with the checklist. And then we can continue the
That would be
discussion.
helpful if we go through yours.
Y'all should just come to me.
But I think we just, I want to add, because since we,
Action, so we might get plans.
but I want to say and recognize, and I've passed it on too many times, because I've been hearing you all along. Ever since this ESSA process has been begun, you've been constantly reaching out saying, I need help.
Right, but I mean, in all honesty, like I haven't done my share, but it's just.
I mean, I know it's a lot and I hear what you're saying, but if you don't have the capacity, then it's hard to do your share. But you were still calling out and asking for help. And I think because we've developed this federal liaison team, federal strategies team, and I'm just gonna speak for me. Because I'm the co-chair of the federal strategy and a Mississippi federal liaison, I don't feel like I did enough to at least try to attempt to get you to a place, even though your state wasn't capacity-wise to do what you needed to do, but just to get you comfortable, because you and I have had some conversation today, just to get you comfortable with what ESSA is really about. So I'm apologizing to you, because I've been hearing it, and I've been passing it on, and emailing, and texting, but it just hasn't come together. And if we're going to do this work collectively and say we got this federal strategy, these regions, like you all travel here, we need to travel wherever. And Louisiana, you know, I got folks in Louisiana, I'll drive your way. I think we need to start supporting each other more than what we have been when it comes to certain areas of the work.
Right, and I think for me, what is helpful is just like I want all my, it would be really helpful to tag stuff together. Because if we're trying to do the moratorium on suspensions and then it's all the other pieces, and I don't have an education background, right? And so it's very complicated on top of what's happening in the juvenile justice system. And so being a group that tackles those issues on top of the, you know, we do real advocacy, like, you know, and we don't have those kinds of, you know, and so we are targeted as an organization that I'm sure racial justice now is as well. Probably a lot of you, but you know, people don't want to work with us. So it's just really, that makes it a really, really complicated. So I was like, I need a combined strategy. So when I'm talking about it, it is all connected. That's just how I think and how I learn. And so it's like, what's the biggest bang? So when we're doing it, we're feeding a bunch of birds with the, you know, that would be helpful to me, opposed to looking at a moratorium on suspension and in silos.
There was when we were in DC, the federal liaisons were in DC last week, and again, I was trying to figure out, it almost sounded like something that could work in this capacity in terms of a tour. So ensuring that the liaisons who have the capacity, who have the, who put in that ground, that foundational work, how, you know, moving that along to the areas that need that help and capacity building and looking through this and seeing what's feasible. I mean, I think like, you know, we have our own work to do, obviously, and this helps me at least say, okay, well, Ohio/racial justice now, you know what I'm saying, we're going to look at these pieces, like DSC said, we're going to look at these pieces, and then we have the goals that we have that makes it less massive. And then I think, you know, identifying the people within our state who, you know, are our other collaborators, but then when it comes to that, and get, like, we do all this stuff in terms of getting the, you know, the systems to respond, but now we need the parents, now we need the community members to engage. And I think these tours and these trainings, so that we can give them these sheets, and we have someone, I know myself, I have someone who's more well versed in it to do a training with our parents, whether it's a webinar or whether it's a face-to-face, you know, a space that we can do. Something that is going to let our parents know and our community members know, like, this is what we're fighting for. I mean, this is what the state plan is saying, this is what we're advocating for, this is why we're here as federal liaisons, is to ensure. I think I'm hearing the biggest part is to make sure that there is meaningful engagement. That's the biggest part of it. So we can do all of this work, but if there's nobody from the community or the parents aren't choosing to be engaged, then what? What do you have?
Yeah, because like, I mean, and I'm sure this is the same for most everyone, but we end up having to throw it off and fight off all these other allies, right? It's not the meaningful family engagement, and will get tokenized or try to be pushed out of the, you know, the process. And so then you have, because we have these huge coalitions that we choose sometimes not to participate in, because the capacity it takes to fight them to move in a certain direction is just, it's craziness. So we end up doing things that are separately, which I think has a pretty good impact, but still knowing all of the, just, because I'm not gonna read all, I'm just gonna tell you right now.
I think that's what
me to read.
Was this helpful if we
No,
did
this
yours
is
that
totally,
way?
right.
If we
Because you
did
don't
your
have to
state
read the whole
plan,
No, I know,
you
but
don't.
you said, right, and which I love and appreciate, and if y'all remember, the last time we were doing some stuff, like I was able to come to y'all, and then I was able to push that table around, what, because they were looking at what, school, absenteeism and different things like that, and I was like, I'm at different school, and they said no, and they were like, okay, well, then, you know, so it's that kind of, because we got strong arm, you already know, Southern Poverty Law Center, like, we have these huge, capacity groups that we end up having to push up against on, for everything, the education stuff, the juvenile justice stuff, you know, and it's just a lot. Oh, God, yeah.
But it's a document. It's almost like, yeah, that's just what it is. Some pages with some information in it. It's not really. I don't know if it's a living document.
Well, that's what I'm
It's
saying.
just a damn document. You know. But you know, I'm sitting here and I'm seeing inside of the document what we've been talking about in our community all along. I didn't know it was in this document. But I don't know how to pull it out of this document, and so I guess that becomes the work inside of the local community around implementation. Because even inside of the safe and healthy students piece, it's there around the discipline. It's inside of there. Inside of the piece around the use of funds to improve equitable access to teachers in Title 1. I mean, it's there. It's there in terms of the research and that they're using. I mean, they're actually using and quoting Alfred Shanker Institute around diversity, around implicit bias.
Right.
I mean, all the stuff is in here. But
it doesn't
It's
connect.
just-
So for instance,
and,
we got all
that's
the
what I'm
discipline
saying.
stuff, right?
I'm able to connect it now inside of these pieces, but I still don't know what it's saying.
But I just mean, even for us statewide, we talk about like, the school discipline and all the different stuff, and we got laws also that we push in one, around positive behavior supports and the training, but our state statute, which we cannot change, like we've been getting so much, we cannot even just remove the phrase suspending kids for willful disobedience, like that's state law, right? And so to me, I'm trying to connect, if you got federal laws, to me, trumps,
Yeah.
right? But you cannot, like, I don't know, I can't paint the picture enough for our lawmakers to be like, you can't say, and we're gonna use positive behavior supports restorative practices and still suspend kids for willful disobedience.
And that's and to me that's part of where what our all of our work that we're not doing is around the federal superseding, because really in actuality it should, but it doesn't.
But when the federal, like, so you not get, I'm just maybe not connecting the dots, but like our lawmakers know this, right? Like our superintendent, he just be like, well, you know, yeah, we know we're not doing that. And the schools know they're not doing it. But to connect all of the dots, like I'm just trying to go like how you actually, they already know, but I feel like what's happening even from with Trump and is tearing all of that apart, right? They are tearing out because if you still give the money when they're saying like the federal,
Big checks.
right, and you're gonna still get, like, what's the incentive to make the school district care, right? And they just, and so when we fight about certain things, they'll just change stuff, like, you know, they used to counsel kids out of school to push out stuff, you know, they change everything around so then they don't have to capture it. So that's what I'm just trying to go, what I know is actually, I know is right, like we know the federal law, like shit, they never paid attention to the No Child Left Behind, like even a whole bunch of children behind, right? So how you gonna have every student succeed act, but then you can suspend kids, and you suspended them for willful disobedience.
I think it's something,
the capacity, I know I'm late to the party, I'm big time late to the party, but I think one of the things is building the capacity of the parents. There are a lot of things that is done in the school system that I think that line that, from my perspective, that's missing is that partnership with parents. And parents come, because a lot of times they don't know that this is my right, this is my child, this child has this right, and it's not taught that you have this right. So you go in blindly, so a lot of things that when you begin to talk about suspensions, you're not holding the principal accountable because you don't know.
Yes and no, but like we do trainings for our parents, right? And they will go and say, well, you can't do X, Y, and Z. Like we have trained advocates that know state, federal law, and you still are spending, you know, days at a time because again, what I'm saying is there's no connection when you got charter schools, like, you know, and it's not even just charter schools because I think some of this was happening ahead of time, but when you also have the charter schools, it's like whatever, because we talk to the administrators, they're gonna uphold the teachers because that's what they do. They're their friends, you know what I mean? And then you go to the board, you gotta ram into a board meeting for some stuff, and then you might do something to help one child, right? So I'm not gonna, I could be here all night it's not even just being late to the party, but I'm just talking about the various experiences. We are on the ground talking to the parents. We gotta, right now, Rosanna's mom is she's a school teacher. So she know the deal. Her son still did not cross that stage. And we had a picket and all kind of stuff that happened. They sent 7 state police to that school, because that's a state, it's a local, but it's run by the state. I'm just trying to, because, we passed some laws, we got stuff on the book, and that's great, but I'm also trying to figure out, like, and we'll say stuff like it, and they'll tell you, they don't know, the teachers don't know, the principals don't know, because you got all new people in and out of these schools like crazy. It's just a revolving door. So I'm just trying to like, okay, fine, we can slam, because I know I went to schools with a model code and showed them this is how you have violated this 5-year-olds, rights and all of this stuff. And it ended up, after 4 months, we got the suspension moved off the child record. But it went all the way to the board. The board chair just said, oh my God, we know these people, y'all need to fix it for that child. But we never could get back to change their student discipline code. And the parents didn't read that. They didn't read all of that. Our parents are fighting to just have their kids sit in a freaking classroom after you got 3 bathroom passes a month. Like, you know what I mean?
3 bathroom passes.
Okay, y'all ain't ready. Y'all ain't ready.
So
Yeah, we got work.
Yes, we are. I know about that bathroom.
Yeah, we got that too.
I know about them 3
It's a
bathroom.
right.
Like, and so that's what I'm saying. I'm just like, why are we fighting for the children to go to the bathroom when they need to go to the bathroom?
When they need to go.
So,
No, I'm sorry, I want to start.
No,
There's 3 bathroom passes a month.
Yeah. They get them a quarter.
Is that, what is
daughter's
it?
school.
what's the point and purpose? And I'm just saying, like, and so we start breaking down the infractions of what they're doing. I'm just like, connect that to I think I'll be glad to go in and.
But I guess that's circling back around to your point, as to work, while being obviously a priority important, you're putting out these big fires to where you can't even get to the ESSA part.
Right. Well, we could if I could go, like, I'm just like this. When I want to go put all my cards on the table, you know what I mean? I'm like, bam, ESSA, bam, this, bam. You know what I mean? Like, and you just connecting it, like, you shouldn't have done this because not only is it state law, is, you know, federal law and you just stupid, right? Like, what is that
But
piece?
wouldn't that be basically that's where each state has to look at what their issues are on the ground, even locally, and then basically, I hate to use the word customize, but create something like that that's specific for the work that you're doing in that particular area where you are connecting those dots. Like us helping around, you know, the federal liaisons helping you connect those dots and then packaging it, you know what I'm saying, as such, when you're engaging your parents and collaborators and local districts and stuff, you know what
I
I'm saying?
guess, because I guess, you know, again, I'm sorry, because, I mean, we done passed enough damn laws that our kids should not be still locked up or getting kicked out of school. So, like, after
That's
the
everywhere.
law,
That's
right?
the bad part.
So, like, after the law, and, you know, after that, and then you sit at all these various tables, and I don't know if it's the same for you all, but it's just like, all these people are clueless. Like, and you are like, wait, have you not heard of ESSA? And you know, the places like your children's cabinet, where you would just assume that that they're connecting the dots, and they're not. Okay, well, I know that's not what we was here for.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like she said, a big part of this is trying to figure out what you need. And Cameron is being very articulate about what she sees her needs are. And the only way we're going to know is that you all got to tell us, because it is different. You know, what I'm even hearing you say, it's different. I don't think the strategies are necessarily going to have to be different. But what you up against here, I'm like, I don't even know myself, you know, how you going to, we want to try this, you know.
And I mean, it's funny because we deal with those things,
But I
but the
really
one
want
thing
to go
we
through the
don't have the capacity, or we haven't been able to do is for real that training piece, because I agree. I say this in the classroom, if the parents don't know, what do you expect? And how do we empower parents? And when you have a parent who didn't graduate from high school, they're looking to you as the authority and not their right as a parent to ensure that their students are receiving certain things. They're looking at you to tell them what to do. It's an insecurity that sets in, so they're already defeated when they walk up to that school.
Because you're talking about their child, and I'm gonna tell you what our parents always say, because we got a bunch of trained parents, but when they fight for their own child, it's very different. So they can't fight for their own child like you can fight for somebody else's child. And I mean, I've experienced it my own self. So you still gotta have advocates. I mean, Rasan, how many times Rasan just told us, he said it, and he was really been in school suspension, and he ain't never said nothing to us about it. So it's like, because they're also trying to just survive and function, right? So he was just trying to get through.
And never thought that would happen.
Yeah,
See, I mean, he never thought that he would monitor.
No,
Now, they would do
exactly.
all this other stuff,
They
but
waited
not
until the
March.
last minute, and then our parents get targeted. Like, he was totally targeted, and they waited until it was like the audacity of that black family trying to hold that school accountable. And then turned out a bunch of because this is the school where all your famous people have gone. Ellen went to, a lot of those folks. But a lot of our local artists, they've been even kicked out of that school. So I mean, because I'm tired. I'm getting going.
Well, it's just a lot. It's basically microaggression. That's what we're dealing with. Even though the law says one thing and you advocate for another, it's basically a way to ensure this power structure and maintain it as opposed to reform it. The language is there, the documents are there, the laws are there to reform it, but the mentality, the mindset of those who control implementation of that has not changed. And so there's these microaggressions, especially I think as we start focusing on these subgroups and people are getting more vocal about their rights within this particular system, you're going to get that top percent, the ones who really call the shots. It's these little things. It's just like poking at somebody or throwing a piece of paper. It's or picking out a scab. And so it's one of those things that the fight just continues. I think we're gonna get more silly pushback like that,
Right.
just because people are feeling more empowered in this particular climate.
And exactly, and I'm gonna send y'all an article that Ashana wrote around, cause you know, we took down some monuments, the Confederate monuments, and so it's like, yeah, but you got Confederacy, you know, you got white supremacy. Like, we got, like, they just fired this guy, one of the principals of a school, because he was at the rally supporting all these. So you got white supremacy all intertwined in it. So the biases are like totally real, and it's like, so what are you, you know, anyway. That's
So, and I know this may sound crazy, but I think I just have to help parents to understand, and really the folks inside the school district, all of the whole plan is attached to the federal dollars.
right.
So
Yeah.
I mean, that's the essence
He
is.
was fighting a lost cause when we went to DC, and our people was like, yeah, they don't really care. Like, they were pushing, like, our folks was pushing the devolved stuff and the school vouchers and the separation of the money, which is the only leverage of accountability. Like, that was been in the
Can't
place.
exist without the federal dollars.
Well, okay. I'm going back to the bar. Who's coming?
Oh my God, I need more now.
Before you retire to the bar, Gina,
I need a glass.
before you retire to the bar.
I'm not.
Yes, we have to prep for tomorrow.
Yes.
Oh, right.
So for those who are participating in you're speaking at the press conference, everybody's going to be there, of course. But for those who are speaking at the press conference, if you could stay behind for a little bit, so we can go over talking points in the order and everything.